Looking back now, you would expect something like that to be a gradual progression. You get a job, you make a little more, you can buy a better place. But when you're in that position, that's not it at all. It's very much about the here and now. And things have to change fast because there is no gray area between homeless or having a place to stay. While living in Austin, we'd been in the first house for 8 years. And there came a point at which the landlord decided that he could get a lot more money in our zip code for our house. And so he wanted to, he asked us to leave and didn't give us any time, 30 days after being there for 8 years. And not only that, but he transitioned the rent, week to week. So clearly with the raised rent and under the circumstances, there was no way we could stay. I think he knew that. And so it kind of set us off on this nomadic expedition to find some place where we could settle down. And we found ourselves looking for literally anything we could find. That involved 1,000 different places. I remember all of them as these snapshots because we didn't spend a long time in any one of those places, but they all had their own sort of unique characteristics. Someone allowed us to stay in a garage outside of the house. The house, I think, was for sale. And so the garage was open and people weren't looking at the house. So it was a little 2-bedroom place, I think, 2-bedroom garage. It had a bedroom and it had a bathroom with a shower with ice cold water, no hot water at all. Another place that we went to was an apartment that we stayed for probably one of the longer periods of times. It had to have been anywhere from 3 to 6 months. And we were there until we couldn't pay the bills. And that happened a lot because, you can only, especially when you're living paycheck to paycheck, you can't account for the unknown, and it happened all the time. Tire goes flat, there's all the money. Towards the end, as we couldn't pay just the rent, we couldn't pay the other stuff. So the phone would get disconnected, then they cut the electricity. So it was dark. And so we'd sit around as a family and, crowd around a table, and we'd actually do homework by candlelight. And eventually we were evicted from there for not being able to pay the bills. We stayed in friends' living rooms who had the space, who could give us a week here or there. At one point in time, we had access to a room. We had a key. And so we would, sneak in there at night after everyone had left for the day and sleep in the room. And we'd all eat dinner, using the microwave and sleep, whether it was on the carpet squares or, on the couch. And, wake up in the morning earlier than we needed to make sure everybody was dressed and out before people showed up in the morning. Just that feeling that, you got to be in and out, that there was something sort of under the radar with it. Ultimately, I guess if I had to pick sort of the moment, the low point, it was Christmas. So, the holidays always makes it extra difficult one way or another. And we had gotten to the point where we were living, out of the only money we had was the money in our pockets. And there was a motel that we could rent by the week. And so there were the 6 of us, and my mom, in a room with 2 beds over Christmas, without presents. As an older brother, I guess, that's one of the things that I almost felt worse about than the circumstance, was that it was Christmas time and there weren't any presents. I remember even during that time, our Christmas meal was ramen noodles made out of a microwave. We knew that wasn't our life. And for me, it was the least stable that we had ever been because it was entirely financially dependent. So we weren't benefiting from the access to a room that we could use indefinitely or a friend's couch that we could stay on for a couple weeks. This was you either pay or you leave. And, so it got to the point where we had to leave. We were out of money. I can only imagine what my mom was going through in that moment, responsible for so many children. I know she was applying to Section 8. I know, and if anybody's ever done that, in Austin, particularly in any neighborhood that is safe for children, that's a challenge. I think when we first applied, we were something like number 5,000 or 6,000 on the list. So there was no immediacy to that situation. And we found ourselves essentially facing true homelessness for the first time. There was a point at which obviously my mom had decided she needed to ask for help. Looking back on that now, I'm really glad that she did, because I know as a person that was always something she avoided. Family business is family business in my house. And certainly when it came to this, taking a handout was not ever her style. And I think it took a lot for her to not just recognize that we were in a position that she couldn't pull us out of on her own, but that it was okay to ask. She literally, pregnant, put boots on the ground and started talking to people to figure out what resources were available. I remember that one charity who she went to for food was able to direct her towards the Salvation Army. Up until then, I'm not sure that we even knew the Salvation Army did anything more than clothing. I'd seen the offices downtown occasionally, but no clue. They really took us under their wing. And it was actually amazing, because in the span of a week, we went from 7 people in a hotel room, having Christmas dinner around the end table, to placed in an apartment with a voucher from the Salvation Army to pay for it. A huge thing for us in the moment, particularly because we had kids at all different levels of school, was staying in the neighborhood. To move out of that neighborhood meant to reshift all of the patterns and bus routes and even familiar places that we had come to sort of work into our routine would change. Not to mention, when you're talking Section 8 or assisted living, a lot of those neighborhoods are not exactly on the nicer end of the spectrum. And so they were able to not only find us, a home quickly, but allow us to stay in that neighborhood. And for us, I always envisioned the Salvation Army giving us more of a hand up than a hand out. They allowed us to become the people, the family, the individuals that we already were, and that our circumstances had just muted. To do that in that time just gave us such an advantage that we could have never found one thing at a time. They helped us get the voucher for the rent, and my mom would contribute her portion that she could afford, and they would cover the rest. They gave us bus passes so that we could get around town without having to come up with the money for that. Certainly found food. So, even if that was coupons or things of that nature, where we could at least put food on the table on a consistent basis. In Texas, you're not always ready for the winter, and around Christmas time, things had caught up on us. So they were able to provide even clothing. They went so far above and beyond. When we got into that apartment, for me, it was like the weight of the world had just lifted off my shoulders. And, I, for the first time, could think about my life again in the broader sense, down the road, what I wanted, what I could do, what my options were. And it just so happened that a very good friend of mine was going on a college tour that summer. So Yale, Harvard, NYU, Columbia, across the Northeast. So him and his mom invited me to come with them. In doing that, I got to see Yale and Harvard, which I fell in love with. And I always thought, what's the worst that can happen? I'll apply. And so, fast forward to being back in Austin, doing all the applications, and as any, prospective college student would tell you, I waited till the absolute last minute to do all of that stuff. And my mom literally went to the extent of walking my applications down to the post office to turn them in on time, to make sure they got postmarked so that I didn't miss out on any of those opportunities. So, just goes to show, even then she was tenacious about her willingness to do whatever it took to make sure we had, every opportunity to succeed. So, I'd applied to a lot of different places, some that I had visited on that trip, and then UT, which was always my number one in my mind going through all this, because I figured there's no way I could ever really leave home, especially with as much as, was going on. And so I actually did get into UT. So really in my mind, as I was going through this process, I knew that I was at least going to Texas, which was huge for me. I never thought that I would stay. Some part of me, I think, always wanted to do something different. But given the circumstances, I was happy to have the option. I remember literally like it was yesterday. I was walking down into the computer lab. Part of me, I guess, was a little embarrassed. I didn't even think I should be applying to that school. I remember opening my email and seeing, at the top of the list that it was Yale University, and the subject line said, "Congratulations." And it was like I just froze. I mean, I was staring at the screen and I thought, this has to be, this has to be like just a letter they send everybody. Congratulations for applying. And as I'm reading through it, it said, you've been accepted into the class of 2006. I think I sat there for a solid 5 minutes and had no discernible feeling other than just I was just baffled. And then it set in that I got in, I got in. I would like to say to the Salvation Army that I can only imagine with all the people that they try to help, with all the families that are involved, and that sometimes for situations beyond their control, it may seem like things don't always work out how you want them to. But I'd like to say that for me, it worked. And I really, really appreciate that all the love and care, all the attention, all of the honest goodwill that went into helping our family, it worked exactly as you meant it to. And there's only so much that I could say in words to ever show the appreciation, but from someone who is on the other side of the coin, who received the hand up, I could never be more grateful.